Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karkur Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also be discussing how the individual chapter connects to the rest of the manga as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are currently on. This is Chapter 126, The Last of a Void War. Captain. Blast you, stupid Quincy! Does it have the ability to liquefy whatever it cuts? You were close, Quincy. Did you save that move for your escape? Why you... Don't bother. I can't attack now, but I can't be attacked either. I'll be like this for a few days, and then return to the department to recover. Goodbye, Quincy. You were more troubled than I expected. But in the end, I will live, and you will die. That hasn't changed. The poison's entering my system if I don't do something fast. Mr. Quincy. Under the badge on my left arm, you'll find an antidote. Bleach. 126. The Last of a Void War. Would you be more comfortable lying down? No, I'm fine like this. Really, you'd better lie down. I'll be alright. My blood's the same as his. The poison won't harm me. Do you think it's a trick? Then please, pour some into my mouth first. I'll show you. That's okay. Why would you poison me when I'm already poisoned? Thank you. Very much. You could have killed him by aiming for his head, but you didn't. That was a fluke. I shot to kill. Thank you for not killing my lord. Giving you the antidote was the least I could do. I don't get it. Why would you want to protect a father like that? I don't know, but when I realized he'd survived, I was kind of relieved. Please, leave after you drink it. The other guards will be coming. They should have seen the Achisogi Jizo. I'll be alright. The guards will tend to me. Okay. Thanks for the medicine. Goodbye. Darn. My legs are lead, and I can't lift my arms. The Ronso Tengai must be wearing off. Finally, my time as a Quincy is at an end. Is Orihime alright? Her spiritual pressure was a lot stronger than that guy's from the 11th Company, so she should have had the upper hand. The others should be heading here, to the Repentance Palace, the Senzaikyu. Ichigo, Chad, Miss Yorichi, Ganju. They're probably on their way. If not yet, then eventually. I just have to wait. But seeing as I got here first, I'll save Rukia. I bet Ichigo wants to be the one to rescue her. He'll be mad if I beat him to it. It's nothing personal, but we must maintain the peace. How? Suzumichi. Bellbug. Forgive me, Ryoka. A Ryoka is a soul that enters the Soul Society illegally. These pointless battles are at an end. Sleep now. Your struggles will be over soon. Get up, Ichigo. You still have a long way to go. It turned out to be some weird kids staring at me. They jumped me before I even had time to think. Danger! And that is it for chapter 126. Something about a void war? Gotta avoid war, man. The last of a void war, I think. Is it? Yeah, the last of a void war. I got there eventually. Let's go back to the beginning of this chapter. Let's talk about this one. Oop, oop. Overshot it, as I usually do. Alright. So, yeah. Starting off, we immediately get to see Nemu, and we see her reaction to the damage that has been wrought before we actually see it, which I think is a good take. It's interesting to see, of course, how much she cares about Mayuri, how much she has this bond, and Stockholm syndrome, whatever you want to call it, like this sort of connection to her abuser, but also her creator, right? That interestingly enough, like a lot of the time you'll see this sort of thing where the idea will be like, okay, well, they see this person as infallible or like someone that you cannot defeat or overcome. Right, that's why they continue to be under that sense of abuse, right? That idea that they can't escape from this person, or like that, like they intrinsically kind of, that person has control over them in one way or another. But interestingly enough, as even though she sees that he can be defeated, she's glad that he hasn't been. It's curious, right? It certainly creates for an interesting dynamic, but nevertheless, we get the chapter title, "The Last of a Void War," which, I don't know that I have much insight into like exactly what this title might mean. I think it's trying to kind of refer to the war between the Shinigami and the Quincy, right? And that Uryu is kind of the last remnant of it. Like, this is the end of that conflict, perhaps. Although, there isn't really that much a sense of finality to this chapter. Maybe there is with, how things end up with Konami Tosin at the very end there. But, yeah, it's, I think that's essentially where I go to, is that there's this kind of bad, like the idea of like a war coming to an end, or the last kind of vestiges of it being here. I could be wrong. What are your takes on that? I'm very curious. Not all the titles are going to link up 100%. Sometimes they just sound cool. I also, of course, see that there's, a play on words of avoid war, right? To avoid a war. I don't know if you could really call it a war between the Quincy and Shinigami, as it seems to be much more like a genocide. But, hey. Of course, smoke clears. We get this very grotesque image of Mayuri, right? It seems as though his Zanpakuto has been broken. Looks like that's just like a jagged kind of part of it. He's still missing his arm from before, but he has this hole that is blown straight through his center, right? We even get to see a bit of his ribs there. How he's even standing in this moment, it's anime logic, right? You kind of need a spine to do that. Yeah, Bleach gets a bit grotesque at times. It gets a bit visceral, and certainly this is a moment that had been censored because, again, the kind of brutality that is enacted. I think it's important for this moment, maybe because it feels like, okay, well, this sort of goring isn't really appropriate to do to anybody, even if Mayuri is a kind of terrible person. But it also shows like the absolute kind of destructive potential that Uryu had reached. Also, man, it really bothers me that Mayuri's sheath for his sword seems to be made of some sort of soft material and isn't just like, you know, a hard sort of thing, but is instead like this kind of nasty cloth sack. I don't like seeing it limp here. Yeah, it's just troubling. That's all. That's it. I do like the immediate cut to like this pan out where, we see Mayuri from further away and we get like this kind of hallway effect almost, and then we zoom out and as we turn page and we get to see that is in fact either side of his Bankai that has been split right in half. And so yeah, I love this kind of image of the Bankai being destroyed, that he unleashed his ultimate power and Uryu was able to blast right through it, and indeed through Mayuri himself. It kind of collapses to either side, and we get to see Uryu still standing there, dripping with blood because of the force of his arrow. And, assumably the wounds that he has sustained. But yeah, looking pretty cool. It's good look. We get to see him looking perhaps a little exhausted here. He's got sweat beading on his face. His expression kind of conveys this sense of, like that he's kind of feeling the stresses of combat, certainly. Mayuri, of course, frustrated, stabs himself through his own throat, which is probably not a move anybody saw coming. Like pretty wild. And then he immediately turns into, he splooshes, he explodes into this liquid, and kind of continues to talk as he liquefies. And yeah, here, like, Uryu kind of shocked reacts like, oh, does he have the ability to liquefy whatever he cuts? Which, I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's a tech, like, if it was a Shikai that could turn whatever it cuts into liquid, that would be pretty ridiculous, and, probably would have been showcased as one of its abilities. I think what's more likely here is that Mayuri has modified his body such to the extent that if he slashes himself through the throat like that he, like, it's like a fail safe to kind of liquefy himself to escape a situation, right? Which is kind of wild. I don't, like, seems a bit extreme, but hey, can't blame the guy for having his contingencies, I suppose. But yeah, I don't really read that as a technique of his Shikai or even of his Zanpakuto, but rather I read that as like one of Mayuri's own sort of modifications of himself. Yeah, like that he expresses that, he's just going to be liquidy for a few days, then he'll return and recover. And yeah, he takes it as his own victory because he figures the poison will kill Uryu. And I think the idea, like, obviously we see him coughing up blood. Assumably at this point, Mayuri's kind of just slurped himself away. It's kind of hard to tell. I think in the anime it comes across a little bit clearer, like Mayuri turning into a liquid and just splashing on away. Just kind of like here, like you get like a slash, slurp, slurp. You get some sound effects, but you don't really. I don't think there's really great visualization of Mayuri as a puddle of liquid, kind of oozing out of the place. It's definitely a wild technique, and it's kind of weird to think about, but yeah, yeah, you know, real like Dr. Wily kind of like takes off at the very end to like, oh, you're not gonna get me, kind of nonsense. Like, absolutely some cartoon villain shenanigans. Of course, we come back to Nemu, who has been sort of paralyzed and stuck over here for a grip, and who we open the chapter on. And so, yeah, I like that we get like this, like, oh well, here it is. Of course, the black intercutting and black backgrounds does feel maybe egregious in a way, in that like, well, this isn't a flashback. Why are we getting the black? But I think it's just because this is the title page that we're getting. Because it's the title page for the chapter, title, whatever. It's done that way to help stylize, Bleach in the chapter title. Um, we get like this nice little exchange where, even though, like this is somebody that ostensibly tried to kill him, and even though this is the enemy, Uryu is kind of treating with Nemu. She shares, this antidote with him. He's kind of trying to take care of her, and again, you get the idea that Uryu perhaps has like a soft spot for women. Um, he certainly treats like uh, Orihime and Nemu with a bit more softness than he does any of his male counterparts or enemies. So yeah, you get that kind of sense from Uryu that he's perhaps a bit sensitive to women. Um, he logics out like, he's like, well, you know, I don't know why you'd help me, but like I get like you wouldn't try poisoning me. I'm already poisoned. Uh, and we do get this sort of exchange, which I do like, where Uryu's like, well, I was trying to kill him, and she's like, well, thanks for not killing him. Which is, again, it kind of gives us this weird insight into Nemu that like that's the kind of only connection she has to anybody else, and perhaps like Uryu's allowing her another connection that she didn't expect, and that's why she shares the antidote. He does ask, like, why would you want to protect a father like that? And yeah, she just says, like, well, I don't, but I'm relieved. So again, like, Bleach kind of exploring these ideas of the connections between people. Like, your bond with somebody doesn't have to be a positive one, right? You can have these kind of bonds formed with trauma, these connections that don't make sense, or that are explicitly unhealthy connections, but they are connections nevertheless, right? And those things can move and motivate and affect you. So again, like that kind of gets explored here with Nemu, and like the one person she seems to have a connection with. Um, yeah, I like this little like back and forth. I like that you see Uryu and Nemu kind of opposed one way and the other as they go their separate ways. Of course, you know, I do really love like Uryu's like, oh well, my time as a Quincy's ending, but like maybe I'll be able to go and save. And he kind of accounts for Orihime. He's like, well, she should be all right, and the others should be heading here. I wonder if like, because like he could certainly feel his allies' spiritual pressure, right? And like he should have known Ichigo got into a big fight. Like Rukia could tell from the Senzaiku, or like from the Repentance Palace. It's all the same thing. She could tell from the tower, right, that they were having this big battle. Same thing with Byakuya kind of releasing his Shikai, and all that going on in the bridge. So like, I wonder if Uryu, like, because part of me is like, well, he should have known already that Ichigo and Ko got up here. But then, like, yeah, if we're taking Uryu to be capable of really picking up on their powers, he would have known, well, they must have gotten close and then they got spread out again, right? Where, yeah, Hanatara, well, he wouldn't even know about Hanatara, but he'd know about Ganju, right? So certainly he might be like, okay, well, Ganju's, as we know, he's currently being treated at the force facilities. And so, like, maybe he senses the idea that they sort of got split up, and And, they might be back on their way. But yeah, he's kind of like, well, they're probably on their way, and if not, eventually they will be. So I just gotta wait, and they'll all get here. But hey, I'll go save Rukia, like like just to kind of piss off Ichigo. I love this moment of like him walking up the stairs, kind of just bleeding, not doing so hot, but he's got this kind of proud smile about him. It's a good moment for Uryu, I think, as he kind of takes account of like his allies and sort of feels as though he's come out of this, um, accomplished something. And I talked about this in the last chapter, right? If Uryu really felt like giving up his Quincy powers, well, how is he going to save Ruki? And I guess the assumption that he had made is, well, there's no one between me and her, right? So, like, once I defeat this one enemy, perhaps, I'll be able to go and save her, and then we can just make a lickety quick exit, and I can rely on the other ones. Because that seems to be his plan here, right? Is that, well, I'll just go and wait. I'll group up with the others. We'll save Rukia, right? It's a bit naive, certainly, especially as the second he gets on top of these steps, he is confronted by Captain Tosin, the captain of the, I believe it is the 9th Division, I'm pretty sure. He is here to put an end to all this. And so, yeah, we heard before that Tosin detests fighting. And so it's interesting, we get this kind of moment of like, well, we've got to continue to maintain peace. And again, you get this sense that Tosin really seems to be on the side of Soul Society, where you have the different captains that are fighting for all their different reasons, and it seems like Tosin's real reason here is that he wants ultimately to have this sense of peace. He doesn't want there to be this conflict, and he sees the Ryoka as the people that are kind of continuing that conflict, right? And so he uses his sword, Suzumishi, Howl Suzumishi, the bell bug, and I like this kind of inverted effect it has. This ring that spins out from him, and seems to affect Uryu, who just kind of collapses. Uh, Tosin sheds a single tear, and expresses that these pointless battles are at an end. Then so perhaps, like, if you're to read this as the Void War, right? These pointless battles, the war being between, perhaps if you interpret it as like the Ryoka and the Shinigami, that all these pointless battles that they're having are at an end. Interesting that he says that they're pointless. Like perhaps he adheres to this philosophy that ultimately Rukia can't be saved, and that this sort of struggle is pointless. Um, because they're in the face of such a stronger kind of force. I don't know. Like, we don't have a lot of insight into Tosin, but we get the sense that like he feels as though these struggles again are nonsensical, and that there's just like unnecessary bloodshed happening. Which I do appreciate this idea that like there's this kind of conflict, and it doesn't need to be escalated, at least from his perspective. He says, sleep now, your struggles will be over soon. So, again, the idea is like, well, Ruki is to be executed, the whole reason that they're here will be taken care of, and it's nice that like he doesn't outright kill Uryu here, but instead just kind of puts him to sleep, is the way that I get this, right? Not just because Uryu sort of just passes out and collapses, but also that he explicitly says sleep. Also, I think a sword where you just kind of draw it and everything inverts and the person dies would be kind of wild. Not unheard of, really, in Bleach. We have some wild techniques that we don't really get told to explicitly. But I think this is a good moment to kind of highlight the difference between when Kubo's trying to be really explicit about something happening versus whenever he feels more comfortable just showing you, right? Because he doesn't have any like internalization of like Suzumushi can affect people with Yurietsu and make them fall asleep or anything like that. We're just shown like this like drawing technique. The Shikai is evoked. It seems to affect Uryu, who then collapses, right? So we see the effect happen, but exactly, how it happens or any of that is left to our imagination, and I do appreciate that. I think that's a good call. We then spit to a another page of Yurichi training Ichigo being on the ground, and then he has a long way to go because again he's trying to achieve his Bankai, the sort of power that Mayuri just kind of used, right? Now, as far as first Bankai and their uses go, Mayuri's does fall a little bit flat, but the only reason that it does is because Uryu has completely used all of his powers to shut it down, right? So we get still the sense that Bankai is quite powerful, albeit not a solution to everything, right? And I like the idea that we also see how a Bankai can be transformative of a power, that it's not exactly just a bigger or stronger version. It's not like a direct upgrade in power, but it's a different application of that power so far. And I do like that too. You know, that it's not like, well, why don't these characters just always pull out their Bankai, and there's rationale for that here or there. Of course, Cone ends up running into all of what is it? The little kids that Karen was playing with, I believe. So, there's that interaction. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, that's all for this chapter. Again, leaves us kind of leading into Ichigo's training. Sort of puts a close to the Mayuri and Ishida conflict. Kind of closes out Ishida's chapters here for the time being. We still have yet to see what happens to Orihime, where she ends up. But, all in all, not a ton going on in this chapter other than kind of cleaning up the loose ends here, expressing, like the kind of yet another kind of failure to save Rukia, and that Tosen's there to stop him. I mean, you do have 13 captains in there, vice captains, their lieutenants, and so our Ryoka are quickly kind of being dealt with. Really, all we can sort of pin our hopes on now are Ichigo, perhaps Renji. We have yet to see what his plans are. And then, we already know Chad and Uryu are down for the count, so we really only have Yurichi and Ichigo and Orihime left out of our Ryoka squad. Yeah. Chad, I guess I've intentionally been avoiding Ganju. So Chad, Ganju, and Uryu all taken out already. So you have to kind of expect that this is going to be ramping up into its last bit of conflict as we're running out of protagonists to get into encounters with, right? Um, Obviously, Uryu's not going to be doing very much else given that he's lost his Quincy powers, but you're left to wonder, what else could he do? He did mention saving Rukia, so perhaps he has other strategies up his sleeves. Whenever it comes to losing all of his powers, it doesn't seem like he's losing all of his spiritual powers, simply just losing his Quincy abilities, his ability to manipulate Reishi as a Quincy. So, he wouldn't be able to draw a bow or use Ranso Tengai or anything like that, is the way that I interpret that. But he'd still be able to, exist as a Kanpaku and see ghosts and interact with them meaningfully. So, kind of like, like, early kind of, where we saw like Chad or Hime or even perhaps Rukia, whatever, she didn't quite have her powers, right? Kind of in that vein. Not very useful, but still capable of some things. But yeah, we'll see. Let's talk about spoilers. Let's talk about how this chapter connects, because I guess to give my final wrap on the chapter, I think it's a fine enough chapter. I do like that we get to see Suminabichi, Tosen's Shikai. I have to go. Like, we don't really get a great, not, what am I saying? Suzumishi. There you go. Suzumushi. I should remember Mushi. Mushi is a bug, right? Suzumushi. Oof. Say that 10 times real fast. I was probably getting it mixed up with yet another one. But anyway, Suzumushi, Tosen's Shikai. We didn't get all too explicit look at it. It's very sudden, but I like the idea of, Tosen's going to do what he can to kind of mitigate this bloodshed and conflict, and so it's a very kind of just like boop boop, all right, taken care of. So yeah, I do like that we get these interactions with Nemu. I like that we get this sort of like absolute wild scale of the damage that Uryu has wrought onto Mayuri and his Bankai. Um, yeah, as far as like this kind of denouement chapter, this moving away from everything with Uryu and into Ichigo's training, I think it serves itself well enough. Um, I wish there was maybe a little bit of a stronger hook to bring us into Ichigo's training, rather than just like, yeah, Yorichi sure is whooping his ass, like, wish there was a little bit more there, but I think it works all the same. Um, yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on this chapter, if there's anything that you like about it, but otherwise, let's get into spoilers, right? So, connections to the rest of the manga, of course. This isn't the only time that we're going to see somebody get a hole blown through them and they'll be okay. Uh, you know, there's this idea that even though his Bankai gets destroyed on this level, Mayuri's able to fix it because it's modular, right? And I'm fine with that explanation. There's this kind of prevailing, people will be like, oh well, it feels like Kubo sort of changed the rules on Bankai because he goes from, you can't let them get damaged, but swords get damaged so much early on all the time, to like, well, actually, if your Bankai gets damaged, it's permanently damaged and it's less effective, and you know that doesn't really seem to fit with what we've seen from Mayuri, and others. Like, how do you even damage a Bankai like Sinban Sakura or Uzaki no Taichi or whatever, right? So it's like, yeah, I understand. Like, there is that aspect of it, but I'm fine with the explanations that are given. And Mayuri, like Mayuri himself, we've seen as an individual that can be damaged and reform. So it makes sense to me that his Bankai can take that amount of damage and reform, right? Like the idea that the Bankai is a reflection of the self, the fact that the Bankai can be damaged in this sort of mortal wounding way, but so can Mayuri, and they can still recover. I think speaks towards like the capability for his Bankai to recover. Um, this whole stab himself in the throat, become liquid, really cool. We don't really ever see that again or get that like all that explained. I guess the idea is that he can reduce his reishi to a different kind of bond, right? So he can completely change the bonds of the reishi of his kanpaku and change himself into an ooze that can just flee really effectively. That's the way that I assume this works. Um, some real heavy body modding there going on. That's all. Um, yeah. Otherwise, I the idea of like there being like an antidote, like a cure in her badge is cute. We will return to the idea of a woman having the solution to a problem hidden inside of her, one way or another, a couple times, I suppose. Um, I'm mostly thinking about how Shunsui has the Zenpakuto spirit that has Nano Yusei's like family sword inside of her. Um, but this comes up other times too, I believe. So this might not be as isolated a thing. Again, I think Nemu resembling to a degree Katagiri makes sense for why Uryu has this kind of connection with her. Um, as far as Nemu's connection with Mayuri, again, I think that I covered that in the base episode well enough. And we only see that kind of connection become stronger throughout the series, right? Um, yeah, yeah. we get Tosin here, and I think this is the biggest thing that I kind of want to talk about. The idea of like, okay, well, Tosin's like, okay, we must maintain the peace. And again, I think with Tosin stopping Uryu here, and with Gin making sure that Ichigo didn't enter the gates right away, the maintenance of the peace isn't like, like for Tosin, I think the peace is something that he wants to achieve ultimately, but this maintenance of the peace also fits for the conspiracy because they want this execution to go on without a hitch, so that you can continue their plans, right? So I kind of read it that way. I wish that we got to see Suzumushi used in like more ways. We only really get to see it here a little bit, and then in the battle with Zaraki later, and then that's kind of it for the rest of the series, which is a bit of a bummer. I think it is one of the more interesting Zanpakuto. Nevertheless, he sheds this tear and he talks about these pointless battles are an end, right? And I really read this as like him seeing, all of this kind of conflict as pointless. All of the sort of conflict that the Soul Society gets engaged in as being unnecessary sort of bloodshed, right? Um, and yeah, like the idea that, like he very much I feel like sees like Uryu, like a bit of himself perhaps in Uryu, right? That Uryu is trying to kind of enact this justice. He's trying to save his friend, just as like Tosin kind of fell to save his own female friend, right? From the Soul Society. And so, if anything, Tosin perhaps feels a bit of a camaraderie with Uryu, but he has to kind of make him go to sleep here. He has to put an end to Uryu's struggle because they need to move along with their plan in order to advance Rukia's execution so they can get the Hogekyo, so that Aizen can kind of transcend, so that Aizen can kind of rule over everything, and then as Tosin believes, that Aizen can kind of implement a true justice where the corrupt officials aren't in charge to allow things to happen, like his own, I'm not going to say his lover, but like his female friend's death, right? I don't think they were lovers, right? I think the idea was that she was maybe betrothed to Tsukishima in like the Camp for Your Own World. Nevertheless, she's a friend of his. She's someone that he was close to. He had this connection, and she's unfairly sort of killed, right? Or dies in an unfair way, and so if only there was true justice kind of meted out, if only there was someone that could arbitrate that justice. Then there wouldn't have to be these kind of pointless conflicts and this sort of trauma that ends up coming to be the case here in Soul Society. And so, like, ostensibly, yeah, like, Tosin's speaking towards these larger plans of his. Your struggles will be over soon, I think, refers to this larger sort of, like, plan. I think here Tosin's really speaking towards the conspiracy and everything that entails. Yeah, I don't have really anything to say. Ichigo sure does have a long way to go. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, that's that's it. All that I have for spoilers, really. There's not much else to mention, so I'm gonna call it here. As always, thank you for watching the video. If you got all the way through it, please do give the video a like to show that, hey, you liked it enough to listen. And I do really appreciate that. If you do want to take your support further, you could always feel free to support me on the Patreon. I do appreciate any of the patrons that I have there for as low as $1. You can have your name show up here at the end credits. You can have me give you a thank you. And you can support the channel directly, monetarily, and make it all that much better. So I do appreciate those of you that are supporting. It does mean quite a lot to me. With all that said, that's the end of this one, folks. I have been Karker Gold, reminding you that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.